The scream pierced the mansion's garden like a blade cutting through the air, so unexpected, so urgent, that even the birds fell silent. The father turned abruptly, startled, when he saw the teenager running towards him, his face covered in dust, his breath ragged, and his eyes wide as if he had just witnessed something no heart should endure. He gripped the man's arm tightly, almost falling on top of him, while the bride, standing a few meters behind, froze with a tense smile that tried to hide the panic beginning to well up in her eyes. The teenager seemed to fight against his own words, as if each syllable burned in his throat before escaping. But when he finally managed to release his trapped breath, his voice exploded with such raw despair that it made everyone's blood run cold instantly. Your son is in the basement. She locked him in there. I saw him. I heard him crying. Before we delve into this amazing story, tell me which city and state you're watching from. Leave a comment and I'll reply with gratitude. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications and like this video. We want to share more stories like this. In an instant, the father's entire world collapsed. The ground seemed to move. The mansion, once so imposing, began to resemble a stone monster hiding secrets in its entrails. The bride, once perfect, elegant, so admired by all, took an involuntary step back, as if her body betrayed her guilt before her mouth could form any defense. The teenager gripped his father's arm so tightly that his fingers trembled, not from fear for himself, but from fear for what he had found. He was just the cleaning lady's son, accustomed to passing through that invisible house, walking down corridors where he was never noticed. But on that day, in that minute, he carried in his eyes the truth that would shatter all the lies built there. The father pulled the teenager away just enough to look into his eyes, and there was no doubt, no fabrication, no exaggeration. There was pain, there was urgency, there was a truth too raw to be ignored. And before the bride could even open her mouth to defend herself, he ran inside the mansion like a man who fears he is about to lose everything he loves. Meanwhile, the cleaning lady's son remained there, his chest rising and falling rapidly, staring at his bride with a look that said it all without needing another word. Her mask had finally fallen. Chaos began before the father even had time to breathe. As soon as the teenager finished shouting the truth in the garden, that truth that pierced the entire mansion like lightning, the father rushed inside like a desperate man, guided not by logic, but by the primal instinct of a father who fears he has lost what he loves most. The door slammed shut behind him with such force that the sound echoed through the hallways, startling even the employees who were trying to hide behind their routines. The cleaning lady's son stood still for a moment, his chest heaving and his hands trembling, until he decided to follow, because he knew he couldn't let him go through that alone. The bride, for her part, remained motionless on the lawn, her smile frozen and her eyes wide, as if she were watching her entire life unravel at a speed she never imagined possible. Inside, the father stormed across the main room, knocking over a small table without realizing it, and calling out to his son in a voice that seemed to tear at his own insides. "Lucas! Lucas!" The sound echoed off the walls, up the stairs, down the hallways, but there was no answer. Nothing but silence, a heavy, suffocating silence, as if the whole house were deliberately hiding the truth. He felt his chest tighten, his heart race, and a sudden painful memory flashed through his mind. His son's smile that morning, the way he held his favorite red toy car, and now the possibility that he was suffering, terrified, hurt. Panic began to guide his steps chaotically, and he opened doors he had never opened before, pushed furniture, turned on lights, and called out the boy's name until his voice failed him. The cleaning lady's son entered the mansion right behind him, completely determined. He wasn't afraid of that house. He had grown up in its corners, helping his mother, observing everything while passing unnoticed through the rooms. He knew where the hidden doors were, he knew which corridors weren't used, and he knew how to recognize the energy when something was wrong. And that afternoon, that mansion seemed like a living labyrinth, as if each wall were whispering secrets that no one wanted to face. He ran to his father, grabbed his arm, trying to make him stop. "I know where to look," he said, his breath still trembling. "She turned off the lights downstairs yesterday. I heard her going down the hidden stairs." The father turned to him, eyes wide, trying to understand. "Are you sure? Are you sure of what you heard?" The teenager nodded firmly, though his voice trembled. "I saw her pushing something big over there, and I heard Lucas crying. I tried to tell my mother, but she wouldn't let me speak for fear of losing her job." That hit the father like a treacherous blow. The idea that his son could be trapped in a dark place while the woman he trusted put on makeup and paraded around the house as if she were perfect was unbearable. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to expel the anger bubbling in his chest. When he opened them again, there was a fierce determination there. They walked together to the door that led to the lower level of the mansion, where almost no one went. It was an old, heavy door, unlike the others, the kind of door that seemed to want to hide something. His father tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. There was no apparent latch, no traditional lock. It was as if someone had installed a different mechanism. The cleaning lady's son, without thinking twice, knelt down and began to examine the edge of the door with his fingers. "There's a lock on the inside," he said, feeling the corner. "She locked it from the other side so no one could go down." The father felt his blood begin to boil. The image of the bride smiling in front of the guests a few hours earlier returned to his mind, now painted with venom and falsehood. He took 2 steps back, took a deep breath, and then kicked the door so hard that the thud reverberated throughout the house. Nothing. The second kick caused the wood to begin to crack, letting out a creak that sounded like a groan from the mansion itself. The cleaning lady's son stood beside him, lifting a foot to help. "Together," he said firmly. And then, side by side, they kicked the door with all their might, and it finally opened, exploding inward as if releasing something that had been trapped for a long time. A cold wind rose from the dark stairs, like a silent warning that things lay there that should never have been hidden. The smell was of mold, of damp wood, of something that didn't match the grandeur of the mansion. The father felt his stomach churn, but he descended the first steps anyway, calling his son's name in a voice that now wavered between despair and hope. "Lucas, Daddy's here." Nothing. Only the echo of his own voice. The cleaning lady's son turned on his cell phone's flashlight, and the narrow beam of light revealed old boxes, stacked pieces of old furniture, remnants of things that had belonged to the family for years. But something there was out of place. Something bothered the boy. He took 2 steps forward, illuminating the walls. "Here. Someone was here recently," he murmured. There were marks on the floor, scratches that didn't match the rest. An old rug looked like it had been dragged. And then behind him, the father heard. First a distant sound, then clearer, a groan, a muffled sob, a cry coming from somewhere in the shadows. The father froze. The cleaning lady's son raised the flashlight and swept the space until the light found a smaller door, an improvised door, full of scratches on the wood, as if someone had tried to get out of there with their bare hands. The father rushed to her on impulse, slammed his palm against the wood, and his voice broke completely. "Lucas, is that you, son?" And then came the answer. Small, weak, broken, but still alive. "Dad, Daddy." That sound destroyed any strength that remained within him. It was his own son's cry. It was the plea for help from a child who shouldn't know any kind of suffering. He tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. The cleaning lady's son approached, held the flashlight firmly, and pointed it at the lock. It can be broken. Help me pull." The father put his arm around the boy, gripped the doorknob tightly, and together they began to shake the door repeatedly, as if fighting against their own destiny. The wood creaked, cracked, protested, until finally it gave way, opening with a bang that sent dust flying into the air. And there, huddled in the corner, his face dirty and his hands trembling, was Lucas, the son he had searched for with a burning heart. And in that instant, even before embracing the boy, the father felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hatred. Not a blind hatred, but a lucid, cold, focused hatred. One that had a name, a face, and a white dress. The bride. The woman he swore to love. The woman who tried to destroy what he loved most. The woman whose mask was about to fall before the entire mansion. The father stood still for a moment before the small, broken door, unable to breathe as he watched his son huddled in the shadows, sobbing softly as if still afraid that any sound might worsen his situation. The world seemed to close in around him. All that existed was that dark corner, that strong smell of dust and dampness, and that little boy trembling as if frozen inside. The cleaning lady's son stayed a few steps behind, respecting the space, but his eyes welled up at the sight of Lucas like that. He knew fear well, he knew the silence of injustice well, and nothing hurt more than seeing a child treated as something disposable. The father knelt slowly, his hands trembling, and reached out to the boy. "Son, Daddy's home. Everything's all right now." His voice came out broken, so heavy with guilt that it seemed to beg forgiveness, even before the boy understood what was happening. Lucas slowly lifted his face, recognizing his father only by the features in the dim light that streamed in, and then threw himself into his arms with a silent desperation that made both their chests tremble. The father hugged him tightly, trying to protect him from everything, including the very memory of that place. "She locked me in here, Dad," Lucas murmured, his voice hoarse. "She said I was interrupting dinner, said I was walking around the house too much." The father closed his eyes so tightly he seemed to fight the urge to scream. His arms tightened around his son, as if he wanted to rebuild him piece by piece, as if he wanted to erase the trauma with his own touch. The cleaning lady's son, watching the scene, had to turn his face away for a second to control his emotions. He knew that this wasn't the end yet. The worst was still to come, because the truth had not only been revealed, but was about to explode to the surface. "We're going to get out of here," the father said, standing up with Lucas in his arms, "and no one will ever hurt you again." The boy clung to his neck, burying his face in his shirt, as if he wanted to disappear there, find shelter, find peace after hours of terror. The father climbed the stairs carefully, but each step increased the rage that burned inside him. The mansion, once so beautiful, so immaculate, now seemed like a labyrinth of hidden cruelty, a stage of lies built by someone he thought he knew. When they reached the top of the stairs, the cleaning lady's son walked ahead, checking to see if anyone was around. He knew the bride might be trying to cover up her actions, making up stories, manipulating employees. After all, that was her talent. They made their way through the corridors until they reached the main room, where natural light illuminated the center of the room. And it was there that they found the bride, standing before the fireplace, her face pale, her hands trembling, and her eyes fixed on the stairs, as if she were hoping the past wouldn't climb up there. When she saw her father holding Lucas in his arms, her whole body froze. Her expression was a mixture of shock and despair, but there was still a glint of arrogance, the belief that somehow she would get away with it. She took 2 steps forward, extending her hands in feigned distress. "Honey, this isn't what it looks like. I swear, he was playing downstairs, But before she could continue, her father raised his hand, ordering silence with such authority that the air in the room seemed to stop. The cleaning lady's son stepped beside his father, his expression firm, ready to speak if she tried to lie again. The father, however, stared at his fiancée with a contained fury that seemed about to explode. "You locked my son in the basement." The sentence was spoken calmly, but each word carried such a heavy force that it seemed to push the woman back. She tried to smile, force a tear, invent an alternative version. I just didn't want him to see what I was preparing. It was supposed to be a surprise. He went in there alone, I swear to God." Lucas, trembling in his father's lap, looked up and murmured weakly, "Don't go in, Dad. She yelled at me. She said I was a burden, that you'd send me away if I stayed near." His father felt his whole body freeze. The kind of lie that attacks a child's heart was the cruelest kind. And the bride had not only lied, but had tried to manipulate the love between father and son. The woman tried to approach again, now with tears streaming down her face. But before she could touch her father's arm, the cleaning lady's son stepped in front, raising his hand, protecting the man and the boy with an instinctive gesture. "Don't start with that," he said firmly. "I saw you coming down. I saw you pushing that door. I heard him crying and you telling him to shut up." The bride turned to him, her eyes blazing, her mask finally beginning to crumble. "You? Who are you to say anything? A cleaning lady's son doesn't know anything. You should stay in your place." The father stepped forward so quickly that even the air seemed to recede. "His place," said the father through clenched teeth, "is right here. Because if it weren't for him, my son would still be down there." The bride recoiled, but her mind began to race, searching for a way out, trying to formulate a plan. Her gaze drifted to the doors, to the employees who were beginning to appear in the background, to the staircase, until finally her breathing became irregular. She realized she was trapped, that there was no convincing narrative, no charm, no excuse capable of erasing what she had done. The father called a trusted employee, the family's security guard who had always been by his side. "Bring her out of my house," he ordered. The guard hesitated for a second, but the order was clear. The bride began to scream, to deny, to try to break free, but each movement only increased her certainty of guilt. "Are you going to believe him? That dirty brat!" she yelled, pointing at the cleaning lady's son. The father turned to the teenager, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "He's the one who saved my son," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "And I never want to hear you say another word against him." The boy took a deep breath, and his eyes welled up, not with tears of pain, but with relief. For the first time, someone grown up was on his side. The bride was dragged from the room screaming, pleading, trying to reverse the roles, calling everyone ungrateful. But no one believed her anymore. Her words echoed empty, as if they were merely the vestiges of someone who had lost everything she never deserved. Meanwhile, the father led Lucas to the sofa, sat down, and held the boy close to his chest, gently stroking his hair in an attempt to repair hours of suffering. The cleaning lady's son stood nearby, watching with a mixture of relief and sadness, feeling that the truth had finally prevailed, but knowing that the most difficult moment was still to come, the boy's final confession. And when Lucas finally looked up at his father, tears streaming down his face silently, he told him the secret he hadn't yet dared to reveal, the one that would change everything in the next segment. The silence that filled the room after the bride left seemed to freeze the air, as if even the molecules had decided to stop and wait for what would come next. The father sat on the sofa with Lucas still clutching his chest, breathing rapidly, as if each breath were an urgent plea for safety. The cleaning lady's son stood beside him, watching, ready to help if anything happened. It was one of those moments when everything seemed about to change, a delicate instant in which the truth was still wrapped in pain, but about to unfold like a gift difficult to look at. The father stroked his son's hair with slow, repetitive, almost desperate movements, as if trying to ensure that the boy could feel that he was finally protected. Gradually, Lucas began to breathe more slowly, but his eyes remained red, swollen, still carrying the weight of something that had not been said. "My love, tell me," the father said in a voice so soft it seemed he was holding the world between his fingertips. "What else did she do to you down there?" Lucas gripped his father's shirt cuff, trying to find courage. The cleaning lady's son took a discreet step, moving a little closer, like someone who understands what it means to keep such great pain inside. The boy took a deep breath, and his voice came out low but firm, as if he were pulling the words from a very deep place. "Dad, she said that you were going to trade me for her, that you didn't need me." That pierced his father like an invisible arrow, piercing every inch of hope he still tried to cultivate. He closed his eyes for a moment, and an old, almost forgotten pain resurfaced. Lucas continued, tears streaming down his face again. "She said that if I disappeared for a while, you would be happier, that I was just a hindrance." The father felt his breath catch. He pulled the boy closer, almost crushing him in a hug, as if he could protect his soul from those words. "That would never be true," he said with a firmness heavy with emotion. "You are the best thing in my life. You are my son. Nothing in the world, nothing could make me want to be away from you." Lucas cried harder, not from fear, but from relief. It was the kind of relief that cleanses you from the inside, that restores the light, that rekindles trust. The cleaning lady's son took a deep breath, averting his gaze to hide his own tears. He knew this was a moment between father and son, but he also felt he was part of that story, because in a way, he was the one who had opened the door for the truth to emerge from the shadows. The father looked up at him and for a moment seemed to see him not as the cleaning lady's son, but as a boy as worthy of affection as Lucas himself. "If it weren't for you," the father said, his voice choked with emotion, "I don't know what would have happened today." The teenager lowered his head, embarrassed by the praise. "I only did what anyone would do," he murmured, but his father immediately shook his head. "No, you didn't. Many people saw signs and stayed quiet. Many people preferred to believe her smile. Many people preferred to pretend, but you had courage, and you saved my son." That statement changed the atmosphere in the room. It was as if an invisible door had opened, letting in a warm breeze that dissipated the coldness and pain that still lingered there. Lucas raised his head towards the boy and stretched out his little hand to him. The cleaning lady's son, surprised, approached and held that small hand with silent gratitude. It was a simple gesture, but full of promise, that they would never be alone again, that this bond would last forever. The father then stood up, still holding Lucas, and called the security guard again. "Tell all the guests that the wedding is cancelled," he said in a tone that mixed pain with liberation. "And tell my legal team that I want to document everything that happened. She won't get away with it." The security guard nodded and left quickly, while the employees who had been watching from afar began to move, much more relieved to see justice being done than saddened by the end of a ceremony. With the room almost empty, the father walked to the large window overlooking the garden. The sun was beginning to set, painting the landscape with golden hues, and for a moment the light fell on Lucas and the cleaning lady's son, creating an image so beautiful, so sincere, that it seemed the perfect ending to such a devastating day. He put Lucas down, and the boy immediately took his friend's hand. The two stood there, side by side, looking out as if they had just emerged from a storm and were learning to breathe fresh air for the first time. The father knelt behind them, embracing them both at the same time. It was an embrace that said far more than words could express. It was protection, it was gratitude, it was a promise of a new beginning. A promise that this boy, who wasn't his blood son, would never again be treated as invisible. "You two are my family now," he said, his voice heavy with truth. "And I will take care of you as I should have from the start." Lucas smiled, finally without fear, finally without a shadow in his eyes. The cleaning lady's son took a deep breath, feeling for the first time what it was like to be seen, to be recognized, to be embraced not as an outsider, but as part of something. Outside, the sky shifted to shades of pink and gold, as if celebrating the rebirth of that unlikely family. A family born amidst chaos, but who found strength in love and courage. The father stood up slowly, and with one last look at the door through which his bride had been thrown out, realized that life had given him a chance, a rare chance, to rebuild everything in a more just, more honest, more humane way. Then, embracing the two boys again, he said the phrase that would forever end that day. "There will never be darkness in this house again. From today onwards, only those who know how to love will enter here." And together, the three walked out of the room, leaving the pain behind, and carrying with them a new beginning that shone like the sunset, illuminating the entire mansion.